Tonight, we begin with a naval confrontation that senior Pentagon officials had described with three words: unprecedented, coordinated, and deliberate. I am Jhon, and I've spent the last few hours analyzing multiple incoming reports, open-source intelligence, and defense signals, and what's emerging is not what mainstream coverage is focusing on. I've analyzed multiple international reports, open-source intelligence, and defense signals. A standoff in the Strait of Hormuz that didn't unfold over weeks or months, but in a matter of hours. Hours that changed the calculus of the entire naval campaign. Hours that tested every layer of American defensive doctrine. Hours that forced U.S. commanders to make split-second decisions with global consequences. What Iran's IRGC Navy did on May 7th crossed a line that U.S. Central Command had hoped would hold under the fragile ceasefire framework. And when that line broke, the U.S. military did not hesitate. They responded with precision, speed, and overwhelming firepower. For weeks now, there had been signals, not official confirmations, not formal announcements, just patterns, movements, and intelligence indicators suggesting that something was coming. Since February 28, 2026, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps had effectively shut down the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical maritime choke points on Earth, after the United States and Israel launched a joint air war against Iran. In retaliation, the IRGC issued warnings forbidding passage through the strait, boarded and attacked merchant ships, and laid sea mines across the waterway. According to defense analysts and cross-referenced with open-source intelligence, Iran's IRGC Navy was not simply responding to events, it was executing a doctrine decades in the making. The Revolutionary Guard's Navy has a large inventory of small, fast attack craft, specializing in asymmetric hit-and-run tactics. It is more akin to a guerrilla force at sea, maintaining large arsenals of coastal defense and anti-ship cruise missiles and mines. Jane's Defense recognizes the IRGCN as the most prominent practitioner of small boat swarm tactics in the modern era. Iran has always been methodical, but also extremely patient in how they execute. Their behavior followed a pattern, a rhythm, a sequence. But something changed. The foundation of Iran's speedboat doctrine was built across decades, and during the 40 days of U.S.-Israeli operations that began on February 28, 2026, the IRGC Navy demonstrated the full maturity of that doctrine. U.S. officials, including President Trump, made boastful claims about having completely destroyed the Iranian Navy. Iranian media rejected these claims entirely, and the facts on the water proved the American rhetoric premature. The signals went quieter, and experts who monitor asymmetric naval activity know exactly what that means. The radar signatures disappear. The patrol boat movements drop off tracking systems. The coastal communication traffic goes dark. And when things go silent, that's when something loud is about to happen. On May 7th, 3 U.S. Navy destroyers transiting the Strait of Hormuz came under attack. The USS Truxton, the USS Mason, and the USS Rafael Peralta were simultaneously engaged by Iranian missiles, drones, and small boats in what officials described as a multi-vector assault. U.S. Central Command confirmed the attacks in a statement and said the U.S. military responded with self-defense strikes on Iranian facilities, including drone and missile launch sites. The vessels came under an intense Iranian assault as swarms of Iranian fast attack boats maneuvered close enough that American warships opened fire to keep them at bay, according to U.S. officials speaking under condition of anonymity. This was not a probe. This was not harassment. These are the types of actions that are only taken when signaling full capability, testing defensive response times, or preparing for further escalation. According to maritime risk analysts, the IRGC is understood to have hundreds of fast attack craft armed with surface-to-surface missiles, as well as many more smaller speedboats. Joshua Hutchinson of Ambry Maritime Risk warned, Iran maintains control over the strait and is showcasing intent and capability to act against civilian shipping. Analysts estimate that the IRGC could possess anywhere from hundreds to thousands of small attack boats, a number so large that even the most intense American airstrikes could not eliminate them all. Different sources are interpreting this differently. According to CENTCOM, this was an unprovoked attack during a ceasefire period. Meanwhile, Iranian state media described it as a reciprocal action in response to American aggression. But one thing is clear. Iran has activated its full asymmetric fleet, and they used it to show the world it survived. The response from U.S. Central Command was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was immediate. Within hours of the engagement, U.S. forces targeted Iranian military facilities responsible for launching a series of unprovoked missile, drone, and small boat attacks against American warships transiting the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. forces intercepted unprovoked Iranian attacks and responded with self-defense strikes as U.S. Navy guided missile destroyers transited the Strait of Hormuz to the Gulf of Oman, CENTCOM stated. The Iranian facilities targeted included missile and drone launch sites, command and control locations, and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance nodes. These were not standard responses. These were high-level strategic deployments, systems and capabilities that are only activated when commanders are preparing for or responding to direct escalation. U.S. Central Command leader Admiral Brad Cooper told reporters he strongly advised Iran to steer clear of U.S. military assets as the Pentagon proceeds with operations in the Strait. He added that the U.S. naval blockade, which has been barring vessels departing from Iranian ports, will remain in effect. Multiple U.S. Navy destroyers are positioned in the Persian Gulf, Cooper confirmed. Tonight, multiple reports confirm that U.S. forces carried out layered kinetic and defensive action targeting multiple threat dimensions simultaneously. Over several hours, the American warships and supporting aircraft mounted a layered defense, firing their 5-inch naval guns and their close-in weapon systems known as CIWS. Small-caliber gun teams on deck also engaged the attacking boats. American Apache helicopters fired Hellfire missiles, and 50-caliber machine guns were deployed from the decks of the ships, as additional aircraft provided support overhead. Missile and drone launch infrastructure on the coast of Qeshm Island. Command and control facilities near Bandar Abbas. ISR nodes that had been recently activated for coordinating the multi-vessel assault. The U.S. targeted the Iranian ports of Bandar Abbas and Qeshm, according to multiple U.S. officials. Iranian state media later reported explosions along the coasts of Qeshm Island, Bandar Kamir, and Sirik. This was not random. This was strategic targeting of operational infrastructure, the nerve system behind the swarm. They didn't act recklessly. They didn't overextend. They hit exactly what mattered. And this is where the situation becomes more serious. Analysts now believe that Iran's deployment of its fast attack fleet was designed not just to damage or deter, but to test. Iran's strategy calls for dispersed swarming of 20-plus boats originating from a number of different directions, not attacking from a single axis, but overwhelming surveillance and defensive response systems from multiple vectors simultaneously. To see whether U.S. warships would hesitate before firing, to measure response times, to probe the layered defense architecture. But they didn't hesitate. The U.S. military said no ships were hit. It stated it doesn't seek escalation, but remains positioned and ready to protect American forces. According to a CNN intelligence report, the IRGC still retains approximately 50% of its pre-war assets despite 6 weeks of intense operations. Those assets include thousands of small boats, vessels often described as part of Iran's Mosquito fleet. This wasn't just a reaction from Washington. It was a message. American destroyers will transit the Strait of Hormuz, and any force that tries to stop them will face immediate, precise, and escalating consequences. As more information comes in, the scale of this confrontation becomes clearer. The USS Truxton and USS Mason had already transited the Strait of Hormuz under Iranian barrage days earlier, on Monday, May 5th. During that engagement, Iran also launched small boats, missiles, and drones in what officials described as a sustained barrage. Despite the intensity of those attacks, neither vessel was struck. CENTCOM confirmed it destroyed 6 Iranian vessels during that engagement. Iran's IRGC Navy fired on 3 container ships in the same week, damaging the Liberian-flagged Epaminondas and targeting 2 Panama-flagged vessels with rocket-propelled grenades and machine gun fire. The IRGC's decentralized command structure and rapid production capabilities mean that losses are immediately replaced. These speedboats, hidden in sea caves along the coast and on islands, remain fully operational, radar evading, and capable of launching devastating missile swarms. This wasn't a small incident. This was coordinated. This was structured. And initial assessments suggest it was authorized at the highest level of the IRGC command chain that remains operational after 6 weeks of strikes. This situation goes far beyond the battlefield. Until the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran, the Strait of Hormuz was open, and approximately 25% of the world's seaborne oil trade and 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas passed through it. The Iranian warnings and subsequent attacks on vessels prompted major shipping firms to suspend operations in the strait entirely. It directly impacts global trade routes, energy supply chains, and regional stability. 8 oil tankers had already obeyed direction from U.S. forces to reverse course under the naval blockade. Meanwhile, at least 26 ships managed to bypass the U.S. blockade line in both directions. According to economic observers, every engagement in the strait, every small boat sunk, every missile intercepted, every cargo vessel turned back, sends a price signal through global energy markets, shipping insurance premiums, and liquefied natural gas contracts from Europe to Asia. This is not isolated. This is interconnected. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. What happens in those 21 miles determines energy costs for billions of people. At this stage, it's important to note that different sources are reporting different layers of this situation. CBS News, which was first to report the May 7th destroyer attacks, highlights the sheer scale and intensity of the IRGC fast boat assault and the layered American defensive response. NPR and CENTCOM statements focus on the confirmed interceptions and the precision of U.S. self-defense strikes, emphasizing that no American vessels were damaged. The National, citing maritime risk analysts at Ambry, raises concerns about the broader implications for commercial shipping, specifically that merchant operators may now be unwilling to transit the strait regardless of U.S. naval protection, simply due to perceived risk. Meanwhile, a CNN intelligence report noted that the video released by Iran of ship seizures may not depict the actual moment of capture and may have been at least partly reconstructed for dramatic purposes, a reminder to treat all state-released footage with appropriate skepticism. This analysis is based on combining all available verified, cross-referenced information from CENTCOM, CBS News, NPR, The National, South China Morning Post, and open-source intelligence tracking. Analysts are now considering multiple scenarios for what comes next. One possibility is that Iran is preparing for a sustained campaign of attrition, not to sink American destroyers, but to keep the pressure on commercial shipping lanes long enough to force a diplomatic settlement on Iran's terms. Another is that the May 7th engagement was meant to demonstrate to domestic audiences and to the broader Muslim world that Iran's military is not broken, not defeated, and not finished, regardless of what Washington claims. Iran's first Vice President Mohammad Reza Aref stated that Iranians will soon be celebrating a great victory, saying, "We will soon hold our victory celebration, and the sanctions and pressures that have been imposed on the Iranian nation over recent years will be lifted." And the most concerning scenario, flagged by multiple defense analysts, that this is the early stage of a coordinated multi-domain campaign combining fast attack boats, naval mines, drone swarms, and ballistic missiles, designed to make the Strait of Hormuz ungovernable for both military and commercial traffic simultaneously. At this point, nothing is confirmed beyond what CENTCOM and multiple credible sources have verified, but the indicators are worth watching extremely closely. From my analysis, there are now two clear paths forward. Either Iran escalates further, activating more of its estimated fleet of hundreds to thousands of remaining fast attack craft, combining them with mine-laying operations, drone barrages, and shore-to-ship missile fire, risking a far more devastating American response that could permanently degrade what remains of IRGC naval infrastructure. Or they step back, accept a diplomatic framework that allows commercial shipping to resume, lifts the blockade and de-escalates, but lose the strategic leverage that their Mosquito fleet currently represents at the negotiating table. Both options come with consequences, and neither is simple. President Trump said after the May 7th exchange, "Just like we knocked them out again today, we'll knock them out a lot harder and a lot more violently in the future if they don't get their deal signed fast." The clock is running. The ceasefire is fraying, and in the Strait of Hormuz, the most strategically significant 21 miles of water on the planet, hundreds of fast attack boats are waiting in sea caves and island bunkers, armed, fueled, and ready for the next signal. This is Jhon, reporting for Revolt Files. All analysis in this report is based on publicly available data, open-source intelligence, official CENTCOM statements, and reporting from CBS News, NPR, The National, South China Morning Post, and Wikipedia's ongoing crisis documentation. Situations like these can change rapidly, and emerging details may alter the picture significantly. If you found this breakdown useful, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because we track these developments in real time. And I want to hear your analysis. Do you think Iran's fast attack fleet can outlast the American naval presence in the Strait? Or does this end at the negotiating table? Drop your assessment in the comments. Because in situations like this, every perspective matters. All information in this script is based on publicly available sources and open-source intelligence as of May 11, 2026. This content is for informational and analytical purposes only.